His sewing machine restoration was probably over 40 years old and was the dirtiest restoration ever done. It took 2 months to complete it, and let's see how it transformed. Buckle up, my friends, because we're about to embark on a journey like no other. It took 2 hours to drive from town to a remote countryside and finally stopped at a house, to be more precise. It looked like a poultry farm, so dirty and messy. Perhaps the owner here rarely comes, only has a dog to guard the farm and a flock of ducks and chickens. They walked around for a while and then found the sewing machine thrown away at the back of the farm. It's not surprising because, as expected, it's really dirty. There's a lot of chicken and duck feces stuck on top. Putting aside its smell, let's continue to see how they will deal with this machine. First, they will need to deal with the outside of the machine by removing the stuck manure on it with a mini shovel. Well, it looks like it's clumpy and very hard. After getting it out, use a scrubber to remove the debris. Remember to sweep it neatly into the dustpan. After the machine was cleaned up and ready for disassembly, this involved removing screws and bolts that held the various parts together. I've seen some disassemblies in my time, but this one was something else. It was like watching a surgeon perform open-heart surgery on a patient, except the patient was a sewing machine, and the surgeon was a repairman with a lot of patience and a screwdriver. To facilitate the removal of the screws, they used WD-40 and a good old-fashioned brush. And let me tell you, those screws were stubborn. But the repairman didn't give up. He kept at it until those screws were out, and the parts were ready to be reduced in jamming with the heating process. Impressive, right? I mean, who doesn't love a good heating process? It's like baking a cake, but with more metal and less sugar. Now here's where things get interesting. They couldn't remove some of the screws, so they decided to leave them for later. I mean, who needs a complete machine anyway, right? But I digress. They saved the wood from a bad situation, so I guess we can't fault them for that. Plus, it just adds to the character of the machine, right? Please save the wooden panel from this dangerous situation by using a hammer to separate each piece of wood. One last time, take the discarded items back out of it, using a brush to scrub the pieces of wood clean. Let's see. Use a small screwdriver to get inside the lock and scoop out the excess wood. Next, they used a wooden pressing table, I'm not sure of its name, to grind the wood, grinding each edge of the wood meticulously. After processing each disassembled piece of wood, apply a little glue and attach them back together in their original condition. Use clamps to firmly fix the wooden table. Apply a little stone to fill in the old wood grain lines, and carefully use 502 glue to apply to the wood grain lines with loose stones. The steps are repeated again when the glue dries. Use a press to grind again to make it straight. Clean the dough by rolling it through a layer of water. Next, use a torch on the grinding head to make it hot, and use that grinding head to grind the rubber band to make it smaller. Next up, the cleaning of the iron parts. They cleaned them as much as they could from oil and other dirt. And when that wasn't enough, they brought out the big guns. Sandblasting. I mean, who doesn't love a good sandblasting session? It's like a day at the beach, but with more rust and dirt. I can only imagine the repairman, covered in sand and dirt, with a huge smile on his face, knowing he just conquered the dirtiest part of the job. Next, you need the help of an iron sharpener. In short, any sewing machine item made of iron or aluminum needs to be sharpened to the edges. They unclog the moving parts and clean the dirt inside. Next, apply detergent to make it shiny, wipe it over to drain. Use fire to make them stick together. Use pliers to tighten the screws. After these steps, you need to spray detergent to make it bright and new. The places where the screws are loose need to be continuously sprayed with fire to weld them together. Let's see, polishing process. Use a hammer to tap the tin plate according to the sewing machine's mold. Continue to grind them. Use a grinder to grind each part of the needle and presser foot, and use a knife to grind the screw. I don't know why they keep grinding the screws, but I guess it will be easier to make the screw in notches and when you screw it in. Well, the tin table is already shiny, but maybe needs a little polishing to make it look nicer. Apply a little polyester on the surface. Continue to use the iron to grind. Go to step, torch the screw, and dip it in oil. Torch the screw valve and stick it in oil. Do this one by one with the propeller's fixed bases. All of them will be soaked in oil when finished. Soak 2 pieces of tin in water and clamp an ammeter in to measure the current. Adjust the steps accordingly and watch them boil to a certain temperature. The tin pieces take turns bubbling. Next, they oiled and nickel-plated the lining of the machine. This process provided a protective coating to the iron parts, preventing rust and corrosion. Plus, who doesn't love a good nickel plating session? After that, they painted the machine black and applied a 30W laser varnish. This step was important to protect the woodwork from moisture and to provide a visually appealing finish. I mean, who doesn't love a good black paint job? And the laser varnish just adds that extra touch of ooh la la. The 30W laser varnish provided a durable finish that will last for many years to come. It's like adding the finishing touches to a masterpiece, but with more technology and less paintbrushes. They started reinforcing the wooden tabletop with bolts and screws. Next, complete the details of the sewing machine. First, install the rear axle reinforced with tiny screws. Next, fix the machine body on the wooden table, then the machine's gear details, and so on, carefully, sequentially, until the sewing machine is complete. Finally, the grease oil was then applied to the moving parts of the machine to ensure smooth functioning. And just like that, the sewing machine was good as new. It's like watching a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, but with more gears and less wings. All in all, this repair process was a wild ride. From the goose and chicken droppings to the sandblasting and laser varnish, the repair process of the sewing machine involved several steps to ensure its proper functioning. Despite the challenges encountered during the recovery process, the server could be successfully restored to its original condition.